Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to start just a few minutes early because we can do some general announcements and program updates while we're waiting for the exact hour for everything to start. So welcome to a new month. We're in June now. So the class schedule for June has just been posted recently, so I hope you guys tune in for some of those. And also just a heads up, so this month I'm doing a bit of traveling. In a couple days, I'm heading to World Tea Expo, which takes place in Las Vegas. And my guest today, Andrew, also will be there. So if any of you are coming to Las Vegas for Tea Expo, hope to see you. Get in touch. Let me know if you're going to be there or not. And then at the end of the month, I'll also be in China for another Tea Expo. This one is in Guangdong Province. Super excited about that. It'll be my first time there. Just a quick update, in July is when we're going to do our next all-member voting workshop. So I'll post topic ideas soon. If you have any topics that you would like to see as a workshop for the summer, please let me know. You can email me anytime. So as a reminder, we do these workshops 4 times a year. Everyone votes on them. The ideas that have the highest number of votes are the ones that will be made into the workshop that all members can participate in. So we do one each season. And we'll probably do that one later in July. If not later in July, we'll do it early in August. Just kind of depends on, I know a lot of folks travel in July. So if it seems like responses are a little low and people are traveling and just not seeing it in time to vote, that's okay. We'll do it in August. But just be on the lookout for some of those ideas. And if you have a sense of what you'd like to talk about already, go ahead and let me know. So we're going to get started here in just a moment or two. Our guest this month is Andrew McNeill with 7 Cups Fine Chinese Teas. They are a legendary tea company. We're so happy to, I'm happy to have Andrew as a friend as well and a colleague. He's also a member here of the program. He's really heavily involved in their buying and sourcing each year. He travels to China several times each year and works really closely with their partners. And when I was thinking of a topic that I wanted to explore early in the summer, settling around new teas coming into season and all these wonderful teas that we see that are available now. And, you know, everyone's at home making their decisions for what they want to buy, what they're most interested in. If I was thinking of somebody I wanted to talk to about that and what that's like from a buyer side to see so many different small lots of tea come in and be available, and how you make those decisions year in and year out, it was definitely Andrew. So I'm super happy that he's able to join us. We're also going to do a little bit of a blind tasting exercise. He and I are going to lead you guys through this. So he sent me some samples of 3 different batches of Taiping Hokwei. Super cool. These are gorgeous leaves, first of all, but they're all very different colors. So this is going to be a really fun tasting. And he'll also explain how you can do tastings like this yourself at home to explore this idea of crop freshness and how we age teas and things like that. So we'll get started. I'm going to send an invite here for Andrew to join us up on screen. Hello.
Hi, Suze. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
I don't have quite as professional a setup as you do, so
where are you?
This is my office, believe it or not. But
cool.
Yeah, against this brick wall, I have. I'm gonna dose those teas in there, but I have the same teas as you do. Oakway, and I figured big leaves, easier to see.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Can't taste teas together with the members of Being Tea, then we can at least look at them together. And
I put the entire packet in here. Do you think I should weigh it?
Yeah. No. I pre-weighed those.
Okay.
So they should be fairly consistent. And even though they may not look quite the same, but yeah. We're dealing with teas that are, I thought would be a good example of stuff that is kind of an example of how tea can change over time.
Yeah, exactly. And, no, I really love it. It's a great example. Yeah. I'll see if I can hold, we'll see who has the better lighting when we hold them up to the camera, but I'll hold each one up just kind of describing them for a moment here, and then we'll get into some of our questions and our direction for everything. But so we have 3 different samples of Taiping Hokui. So sample A, let me see if I can tilt that. Oh, we had a good shot of it there for a second. So it's kind of more olive colored. I think we see this color a lot. I know I do from cafes. A lot of times you see Dragonwell is around this color, right? So it's a very familiar tea color for folks. If you've never had this tea before, it's a really fascinating, just awesome tea. They're huge leaves that are flattened. It's a really eye-catching tea. Sample B and sample C are really curious because they're both brighter, but there's like kind of a saturation tone difference. So sample B is kind of this lighter bright green. I would say almost kind of like a lime colored. It's really, really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is B on top, C on the bottom.
Mm-hmm. And C has like this deep emerald color, I would say. And C also looks like maybe it's not as spread out. Like the leaves are not quite as flat. They look a little bit more together. Because some of these leaves on B are super flat and broad, I guess. I mean, not necessarily flat, but broad. And C looks a little bit more like they're compact. It's really interesting. I think that obviously that's a slight processing difference, but it's really cool.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a little bit of a curveball here. But I mean, generally, though, to approach the topic of freshness and aging in teas, I think something I'd want to start with, just to talk about this, is that it's mostly a matter of opinion. Understanding sort of the qualities of resting tea or aging tea and introducing desirable flavors with time passing. This is something that is still not really understood, not widely agreed upon on, what's good and what's bad necessarily. And the reason I say that is there's it's still very like productive arena in the domain of Chinese tea especially, but when you have stuff like white tea, pu'er tea, oolong tea, green tea, all having this discussion about some aging can affect the tea for the better or the worse. You have a really complex subject on something that maybe you wouldn't think was that complex, right? The fresher the better.
Right.
We've always heard, but I guess I think with us today we can talk about just broadly how tea changes with age, and in my understanding of what's driving those changes as time goes by, and kind of where that sweet spot is when things are going to be tasting good with some age, or how that could potentially work for yourself at home if you're a tea drinker, like any of us who wants to keep a good stash of tea and drink it when it tastes the best. But the Taiping Hokui, this is, I mean, since we are in like kind of the tail end of spring season, this is a good tea to do, since it's since it's so distinctive looking. I think it would show.
Yeah.
But also it's a tea that, like a lot of Chinese green, is considered to be really delicate and delicious when it's fresh, and maintaining that freshness is, I think, broadly speaking, is what's desired of this tea. So we could look at there's a few examples of this tea here that are doing that in different ways.
Yeah.
So now, okay, so do you want to go into it blind? What do you think would be best? We could go into
I think going into a blind would be kind of cool. Yeah. I mean, I have some ideas just from the smell on them and just their appearance. But yeah, I think just go into a blind and just see what we're tasting.
All right. Yeah. It's just an apology in advance. There's a few curveballs in here.
Cool.
But yeah, you already picked up on one just in the shape. There's a processing difference. Going on. But yeah, we'll brew these teas. We'll taste them together and kind of talk about them.
Yeah, I think maybe before we get them soggy, let's hold up a couple leaves.
Sure.
So we could see some of these differences. So like I mentioned before, between B and C, you can really see like there's a difference in shape, like how they flattened the leaf. So B is this really broad, and also it looks maybe like the leaves are slightly shorter. And then C is these really long, narrow folding, how they did this.
It's a great point to bring that up and look at the dry leaf before they infuse. They definitely start to look more similar once they infuse, but dry leaf here. So maybe going back here with A, starting at the start of the list, we've got this tea, which has this kind of olive green color to it, darker. Relatively dark, especially when you compare it to B.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dealing with similar leaf shape here, but
totally different color though.
Totally different color, So this really light, bright green from B, and then again the contrast B and C. We're back to kind of a darker color, maybe some more. Kind of brighter highlights in there on C. And again,
also, I noticed too, like one of the nice details about this tea, you can see the press marks. You can see the little cross press marks on there.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. Like some teas, you can see those little manufacturer details, but then with some teas, of course, you don't want to see too much, right? Like you don't want to see blister marks on a dragon well, for example.
Yeah,
you can tell that's pan fired, but you don't ideally want to see brown scorch marks on it.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny. That was something that come up. People would, when I first started in tea, they said, "Oh yeah, go for the dragon well with the pan, the scorch marks, because then it's pan fired." It's like the
okay. Then it's pan fired.
Then you but is it good? So with these, we'll find out.
It completely comes down to taste too. Taste and, as you said earlier, preference.
Sure. Yeah. And let's see if they're any good.
All right, I got water ready whenever you are.
All right, let's do it. I'm gonna pour mine here.
Okay, I'll do it on the same.
And so this is a tea that really is defiant in a lot of ways. It is so leafy that it's really hard to use a standard cupping equipment.
Yeah, that's true.
Putting it into your favorite gaiwan, unless you got a really massive gaiwan. This works out anyway, though. You kind of have to steep it in a tall glass, even for evaluation. I mean, I've seen people put it in line in a cylindrical judging vessel, but let me see. Here we go. Here's our 3 teas. That leaf is going to need to be saturated fully and immersed in water.
Wow, C is floating a little bit. It seems like it's kind of trapped a little bit more air.
Yep. Good eye.
There's like a distinct difference here at the bottom of the glass. You can see that there's a lot of water there, versus A and B have completely sunk to the bottom.
Yeah, you can see consistent with my samples here as well.
Huh.
Yeah. But you're doing it in the glasses like this.
It'll be nervy to take pictures while we're talking.
Yeah, do it. This is actually when you're buying. Well, I don't know, when I'm buying tea, or perhaps teas like this, especially kind of early spring green tea, where there's lots that are coming in quickly and going even faster. You really have to make a quick decision, and
yeah, that's a good point.
You may be on the ground, you may be traveling, you may be in a hotel room without, say, standardized cupping equipment. The best you can do might be a bunch of tall glasses in your hotel room with some boiled bottled water, and you go off that. And so, yeah, a dirty secret of the trade is a lot of buying decisions have been made just like this, in those moments where time is way more urgent than getting standardized cupping equipment. So appropriate that we're doing it this way here today. Yeah. So these are teas that, well, I don't want to say too much more about them with it, because I want to give you a chance to taste them as blind as possible. But with green tea, just going back to what I was saying earlier, how there's a lot of different opinions on how you should age tea, or what tea should be aged, and what's desirable in terms of time. And that's happening in white tea, green or white tea, oolong tea, pu'er tea, black tea.
Yeah, we had a question from one of our members about white tea. Is it appropriate to take it now, or do you want to take it a little bit later?
Sure, we can get into that. Yeah.
I'll read his question that he had, just so I get it all in. So one of our members, who is located in New York, said he was in a tea shop last week in New York, and they had an aged white tea on the menu from 2014. And so he asked, how does white tea age over time? And he says, I figured because it was the least processed, it would not do well with aging, but perhaps that's wrong. And how can you compare this to what happens with green teas? And I think that's such a good question, because I've observed that as well over the last few years, this popularity with aging other types of tea outside of what originally had been considered appropriate for that, which is primarily like pu'ers and oolongs and some black teas. And now you have like these aged white tea cakes, and they're quite delicious. So like, how does this change how we talk about aging tea? And then we talk about green tea, like you say, some types you can age and some types are really not appropriate for it.
Yeah. And so I'll offer my opinion. I'd love to hear your take on it too. But that, right, you could take anything to age. All we know for certain is the flavor is going to change over time, year to year. How you can expect that flavor to change, will depend on the tea. But so say, for example, in something like a white tea, you start with something that has oftentimes those bright, sort of grassy green vegetable character in there, along with some alfalfa straw, and then some sort of richer juiciness that comes from just a slight amount of oxidation that might be happening in that withering. And so that over time, the force that's affecting tea as it ages, I think you can say broadly across all styles, is going to be the continued oxidation of the leaf. With either residual moisture in the leaf or the ambient moisture wherever it's stored, pushing that along. And with that, you also have some microbe activity, right? Pu'er tea famously claims this, that it's matured by the microbe activity. However, Camellia sinensis up there in Montreal, they a few years back had funded a research project on looking at the different kinds of microbes that were on old examples of tea.
I remember that. That was a really cool thing, and then it got so overwhelming for them that they were like, "Oh, at some point we have to cut this off." This discussion is just so big.
Right, it's complex, but they were doing it. I think trying to do it in an honest way with a scientific study and really analyze this. But as I recall, the initial results of that study was broadly that the microbes that are living on tea aren't necessarily different from what they found in examples of old Pu'er tea versus examples of say I think it was Longjing was the other one.
Yeah.
Those I think part of what complicates that too is how those items were stored, right? Different microbes will prefer different little microclimates. But those two factors driving the changes in the tea, the continued oxidation and relief, and some microbe activity, in the degradation of the chlorophyll, the aromatic oils in the leaf, as it dries out or as it succumbs to the moisture, those things evaporate. That it's going to change, and so just stating the obvious that tea is as it ages is going to be changed. It's going to change, and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing has been something that the market's determined over the last few years. In the case of white tea, why I think white tea makes an excellent candidate for aging. I mean, there is some precedent for that comes from the folk medicine traditions in Fujian, white tea producing areas. So doing that minimally processed, basically just regressively dry tea leaves. There in Fujian, when Seven Cups first started buying white tea, even then they were talking about old white tea being a tonic, a medicinal tonic.
Yeah.
We weren't necessarily talking about it as being an investment opportunity or.
Well, it makes sense because there's no Kilgreen step in it, so like it would have the potential that it could evolve if you stored it properly.
Yeah, sure, and it certainly does. White tea will turn quite dark, and you can get it that brews up. Say more on this sort of cereal grain side of things.
That's a good description. Yeah, I like that.
But it's there's still that richness. I think the material that is predominantly used in white tea. There's those varieties, the Moving Dabai, those varieties are make really sort of juicy, chewy tea that has flavor, that has guts, that will persist over time as it ages, and so that's, I think, what makes a good candidate for aging is something that has complexity, and is not necessarily focused all in aroma, but has some guts and complexity in it that sticks to the body of the tea, that sticks to the soup. That's my personal opinion. I think
that's a really good observation. I like that, having it be more about than just the obvious aroma, because that's fleeting, and all of that breaks down over time pretty quickly. So there has to be, if the tea has substance underneath that to offer, then there's a higher potential that it could age really well.
Yeah.
Something that I've always thought of too, that I hadn't really thought of applying it to green teas per se, but for most other teas, I've described it as when I'm tasting a set on the cupping table of fresh samples, if there are some that seem almost like too loud, that the volume dial is just really up on it and they just jump off the table. To me, that seems like that'd be a good candidate for aging. Versus one that's a little bit more subtle and quiet and thoroughly enjoyable now. But my first thought is, okay, I would not want to buy that very much of it because I would want to sell it quickly. And if I think that I would need to hold on to this for a year, then might not be so great by the end of that year. So I kind of view it by the personality of what it's showing right then after it's made, if it could age or not.
Yeah. I think that's a good guidepost, right? You're facing the strength of the tea. You know, if it's radioactive and needs to just like dial back a bit, is a good candidate for a rest. And there's arguments for that, you know, that are supported by kind of the lore as well, you know, if you will. The people, you know, talk about, you know, in Chinese green teas, talk about it being kind of too aggressive to drink at first. You know, there's older documents that Lawrence John, blogger Marshall N. I think a while ago on his blog, he pulled out something from. Actually, I think it was a Japanese source, but I think it was. I'm not 100%, but I think it was probably like, you know, 19th century.
Wow.
That wrote about the fresh tea isn't good to drink for your stomach.
Interesting.
So it's too harsh on the body. It's best when you drink.
Yeah. It's like the idea of overbrewed tea that gets talked about with overbrewed green tea, that it's either not good for the kidney or not good for the liver. I forget which. But it's like, it's just too strong. It's depleting. So
I think there's sense in that. A lot of cup holders, 7 cups, well, significant enough number of them said to me, I prefer to drink the Longjing. You know, this green tea when it's 6 months out, and that's when that's when things are set in the lead. Better in the lead for, you know, it's the toastiness is receded.
It's settled down, kind of. That actually that description gets applied to Darjeelings a lot too. You know, the idea that they need to settle and that they need to mature. And it's interesting because there's like a parallel concept in coffee too. Like you want the coffee to rest after it's been processed before you send it off to, you know, to roasting. So some places will, and it's different than aging. It's just a rest period to let everything kind of settle and its more stable character to come out. And then you would send it in for roasting. And so that was something else I wanted to ask you about, like, this idea of teas that are super, super fresh, and do they behave differently when you're trying to work with them and brew them? And is it better to let some of them rest for a while?
Yeah, if you have the option to let some of them rest for a while, so say, you know, if you're buying tea, right, you have to make a judgment, you know, very quickly, right? Otherwise, a lot might sell out. But and so, but if you have the option to say, you know, you're buying tea for yourself versus professionally, if you're not under pressure of time, and you taste something initially, letting stuff in the very early spring that you know, has just come in, those teas are going to be intensely aromatic. And so that is, as you said earlier, is a really fleeting thing. And so I find, you know, as time goes by too, the tea loses that intensity, but also this is a personal observation. It becomes a little more delicate. Those intensely aromatic teas from the very beginning of the year, hitting even with boiling water, you know, or close to it, can actually yield still pretty good tea because you've got all this charge of aroma coming out. in that really hot water. And so there's maybe a little more room for error. You're already working with something intense. You can, of course.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because like when it's super fresh, it's easy to get kind of tricked by those too, because people are like, oh, everything just smells great and it tastes great, and it's harder to be critical on it until like it ages just a little bit, it settles in, and then it's more subtle, and then you can really do some investigation there and think about it.
So I'd say if you're able to buy a sample or two or a small amount, and you're considering buying a lot to get you through the rest of the year, if you're a big time binging drinker or something that gets a couple or a kilo a year, sitting on it for a time is, I think, a great suggestion. And but maybe we should go back to our teas here before I forget.
Yeah, let's taste these. And then we also have a couple questions that just came in. I'll just put those out there while we're getting ready to taste here. So related to this is storing of white tea and oolong compared to pu'er. Is that different? And then pressed versus cake style. So would you think that maybe perhaps white tea is similar differences to pressed versus caked pu'er, in that I would assume that pressed would hold better than a loose as far as aging goes?
So again, to be honest here, I wish I had an apples to apples comparison, that I had performed in the past that I could point to and say that this that cake white tea versus loose white tea at the same age is going to give you different flavors. But I don't. But however, I would agree with you, Suze, that those probably it's going to be similar to pu'er tea and compression, right? You've got with great for storage. It's and also you've got all those sort of this concentration that leaf material and the aromatic material in there. It's going to hold that character longer. And whereas a loose leaf tea, more surface area against the air, a little more spread out, has a tendency to either dry out more, age quicker, oxidize faster, since it's got more of it hanging out there. And so, the cake cheese is usually preferred for aging, but people weren't compressing white tea into cakes 15 years ago, as far as I know. Really, the caked white tea came about, I believe, or caked oolong tea, which also is out there. And caked anything. That it really was a reaction to the popularity of pu'er tea and kind of the Dutch tulip mania that was going on with aged that. And so, I have seen aged white tea that was was old stock that was later compressed into cakes, right? And so having tasted that, sweet, delicious, no complaints there. But I can't say that I've tasted a truly old example of something aged contiguously.
No, I haven't either. Not anything more than just a few years. And if they're stored properly, is really good. And I think maybe could we define what stored properly means?
Great. Yeah. Excellent question, and also one that's hotly debated. Proper storage, it's especially debated in pu'er tea, and there are an entire books and blogs and lots of discourse devoted to this. But with white tea, with cake white tea, the recommendation that I've often heard there, you store it wrapped into paper, but in a clean air environment, a moderate amount of moisture is reasonable. But you don't want it to be too dry or too cold, especially because that's going to kill off the aromatics in the tea. Whereas oolong tea, aged oolong tea, the preference for that has come from examples of this tea that was probably just not sold for a long time, and so the real tiny but I guess existent market of aged oolong tea has been for sealed packages of say contest winners, the tea that won a contest in Taiwan, in the 90s, and there's a sealed package there that
in other words, not trying to maintain a microclimate of anything, just sealing it.
Right. Yeah, and that's the suggestion I've heard from tea makers in Wushan as well. For the Yancha there, they've I guess stored in a package, and so you're not trying to really encourage like introducing microbe activity, that way that people talk about in poor tea, a certain humidity level, what's retained in the leaves. The content.
I think that's a really good point of like the difference between maintaining something, which is proper storage, and it's in its own kind of way that you do that, and then keeping something in storage under the conditions that you're actually trying to change it under a specific way. And so those conditions are similar, but your intent of how you keep it in there and then what you do with it as you're checking it. Like, for example, if I'm holding on to oolongs, I always put them in my little roaster guy here to kind of warm them up and just see how they're doing. Because I noticed that if I just drink them out of the package, they just kind of smell and taste like package because of this idea that you don't try to create a microclimate for it. You just keep it in the package. So have to introduce a little bit of just really low heat to just kind of warm it up. And then you can get a sense of, okay, how is it coming along?
Yeah. If you're warming your leaves, that's definitely some advanced form there. And with aged tea, that too is done on a professional scale, on a large scale.
That's people's entire jobs, which I think a lot of folks don't realize about oolong, is that you have sort of the basic oolong that's made, and then after that it goes to the roaster, and that's their job, is to apply this very specialized art of taking the flavor further.
In some cases, it's done it's more on the commodity level too, where there's old stock tea, be refreshed, roasted, black teas even, and so it's a way that you could potentially be sold old tea, right? The old tea that's just been re-roasted, so it's aromatic, right? And a little deceptive. I find though too that old tea there is a distinction, in the aroma of kind of older tea that's been re-roasted and very fresh stuff. So there's another point that I want to touch on too. Just this is less related, but with well, actually, let's taste tea first, because this the examples we have before us. How about let's do that? Yeah.
So I was going to do a little leaf scoop action here with my spoon.
Oh yeah, good call. You starting on A? That's it.
Take a look at the liquor here too. Wow, B is very spinachy and asparagus-y. It's making me hungry.
Yeah.
It's just like just pure spring asparagus and spinach. It's really, really beautiful. And C has this distinct fresh toasty note to it. So I think for folks who really like that lightly nutty toasty quality, this would be a really great one to consider. Whereas B, I don't get as much of that. I get more of just like the plant kind of buttery asparagus spinach quality, but not as much of a toasty note.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's just taste it. The color saturation on the liquor of B to C is really interesting too, because B is a little bit, it looks denser, like the color is more saturated on the spoon here. And it kind of moves in this sort of brothy way. And C is just a little lighter, brighter color, and it moves a little bit more just like fresh spring water. You know, it's not as kind of weighty as you jiggle it. It has this really nice, fresh, delicate taste to it. And B is a little bit more like this buttery sort of quality to it. Three totally different teas.
Yeah, you're a real professional, Suze. All the viscosity there. That's a difference that I always like it when people talk about it. I like to talk about it, Suze and I have worked together on cupping protocols and just have had discussions about how cupping protocols in specialty tea specifically can be improved, and that's actually a character that is the actual texture, the mouthfeel of the liquor itself is something that's I'd say really underrated.
Totally is, and because it's something that you can really easily observe. You know, you have a lot of tea bloggers who write about the bubbles on the tea, like the amount of saponin that's in it, or the amount of amino acids and proteins that are causing that. And so, I mean, tea bloggers write about it, but professionally, we rarely talk about that in terms of, like, we describe mouthfeel. I think our way of talking about it so far, at least as I've had exposure in the US mainly, is astringency. That's like the only mouthfeel characteristic we talk about, when there's so much more to mouthfeel that we could really be talking about.
Oh, yeah. Well, you want me to just sort of talk through these and what is? Okay, yeah. So, a few curveballs in here. I think maybe
as we're talking, because it relates to this tea, another question that came in, is there a desired profile for this tea? Like, when we were looking for this tea, like, what is the ideal of it?
Character guide. So what I look for in typing Hokwe is a tea that has a mild infusion that retains some floral quality to it, maybe vaguely orchid-like. That's like the classic sort of Chinese description of typing Hokwe that I've often run into. You hear that a lot for spring green teas in China is using orchid as a descriptor, but there's this kind of the ambiguously floral quality on what I think is better typing Hokwe. But underneath that, you have something that's lush, refreshing vegetal sort of flavor. Despite its big, pointy, aggressive-looking leaves, it's a tea that should steep up without astringency. It should be quite mild, and just sort of retain those more delicate flavors. And so, being this tea that's more about aromatics, and a tea that is going to have this delicate body. It really relies on its aromatics to sell itself. This is a tea. Oftentimes, you'll run into an issue where the moisture content in the leaf is fairly high.
Oh yeah, I could imagine that.
And so that's actually what's going on. In example A here. This is a lot. This is from 2018, and it's tea that wasn't really dried to completion. So that portion of I think it was a sample we got actually. I think it wasn't. I'm sure it was really aromatic when it first came off the production line. They just finished making the tea, but quickly turned. And so what we're looking at here, and this is an example of, I think, a less desirable aged tea, where it's yellowed. Flavor-wise, to me, it's flattened out. There's not as much going on there, though there is still flavor. That flavor is more on the like I said before, that cereal grain descriptor is what would come up here.
Yeah, totally. I would have thought this was a much older tea, actually, and I think that's actually something worth thinking about too. Is that something that's only a year old should not taste like this?
Yeah, it's a bummer there.
It's a bit of a bummer. Yeah, I would have said, I guess, to put a pin on that. My guess would have been that maybe this was like a 2017, maybe 2016, but probably 2017. I think I would have expected this kind of level of flat on it. And that's why I said, like, it reminds me of a lot of the times when you have Chinese green tea, sometimes at cafes, where specifically often they're stored in environments that are less than ideal. Like, maybe they have it in a flip top canister and it's right near the coffee maker or somewhere that's hot and humid. And so it smells like it's been packaged a bit. And it's just, it's like, it's still there, but it's flat. It's really flat. So it reminds me of that character.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, being kind of an ugly duckling, it wasn't really stored well by us. I think I took it from a sample bag that we had. And so, with that storage, there's a little bit of storage flavor in there.
There is
flavor creep coming in. With teas, like you said, in cafes, there's a lot of other aroma in there, and that I don't get, other than the flatness and kind of the and sort of dustiness there. I'm not getting so much from this tea, but just generally, with older teas that haven't been properly stored, you can sort of taste the environment, these environmental smells normally associated.
Is there something correlation with just how the leaves behaved in the water, or is it just kind of that's this tea, you think, but that's not necessarily a indicator that one would look for across the board? Because I just noticed it immediately sunk.
Yeah.
And kind of collapsed on itself a bit, whereas the other ones seem like they have more air between the leaves and they're more buoyant.
That was a great observation. I'd never thought of that. There's a reason we're getting a difference here, and this one's so buoyant, and this one isn't. That could explain that. But here we've got the most collapsed one is the one that's oldest. With the with the defect is good observation. Perhaps that's the leaves have loosened and they don't have the air pockets that fresher tea does. Yeah. The second one and third one, sample B and C. This is not exactly fair. It's not exactly apples to apples. What you're tasting there, you're tasting two teas from the same producer, or same team of producers. One was used was produced using a more modern machine.
Oh, cool.
That straightens the leaves and rolls them. And the other one was produced using the traditional method. And then,
so is this sort of like one of those like the machines that are used to make Longjing that kind of flatten it out like that? It has that roller that does it. It's just kind of a mechanized thing that helps flatten it.
Vibrating trough. Well, actually, in this case here, the machine, I haven't seen it. It's only been described to me. But in both cases, in typing Hokway traditionally, it's pressed against the mesh and flattened out. In this case, in both cases, they still have that mesh pressing. But this one here, it's the leaves are distributed on that whereas this one here, they're laid upon each other. It's done with the attention of the human being, and so that's
very cool.
You're getting denser compression here, right? Because it's more, it's deliberate, and I think that's why we're getting these leaves floating in there, the air bubbles. And the reason I said this wasn't really fair. There's another variable in here. This came. Both of these teas are 2019 teas. Actually, I don't have. I wish I could have one. Year 1, 2, and 3 for you, but I didn't have an example in the warehouse of that. But this is a 2019 tea that had come in a damaged package, and so it closed and so it wasn't. Wasn't fit for sale. It was, fit
for tasting.
So it's lost a little bit of its aromatics. I believe it's retained its color and its body in there. It's not flattened out like this, but you have a tea that I think is going in the direction of say if this was a tea from the previous year, and I would expect it to be darker in color, certainly, but sort of similar, retaining similar character in the body, not being quite as aromatic. And might register the final one here. Here, this again, not apples to apples, but since this is 2019 tea, but done using that handmade process. It's also it's
more complex. Like it really has more to it than B is really quite nice in the same way that you can have machine-made dragon well that's quite nice. Like I've had, and I'm sure you have too. Like I've had Longjing samples from the same producer who makes some of his entirely by hand and some more for commercial scale using the machine. And he still applies the same kind of mentality of how he sorts the leaves and how much he processes at a time to really get it to be as good as he can. There are distinct differences between the two, but they're still good. They're still both really good.
Yeah, that's an example here. And aside from, the damaged package situation where I think it's lost some of its aromatics. It's great tea, even with the difference in processing.
Take another picture here.
I don't know. My assumption too, oftentimes, is that you, with the handmade stuff, since you're investing so much labor and time into doing that, you're also naturally going to want to put your preferred leaves into it too.
That was the impression I got too. It was like these are the best leaves for that, and this goes into the handmade one.
Yeah, and so again, not quite apples to apples here.
Yeah,
but hopefully still instructive and interesting.
I think so, because like it does go into something that I hear folks talk a lot about, which is that the only really great teas worth buying are the ones that are completely handmade. And when you're having something that is made properly and it's fresh and it's been stored well, this is both a good example of that's not entirely true. It's just really your preference and your budget and things like that. Yeah. And it also shows how just the slightest storage issue can affect it. So like B probably lost some of that nice toastiness just because of the ruptured packaging. Mm-hmm. So it's still quite good. So like if I were working with both of these, say on my menu or something, I would want to try to sell B first because I don't think it's going to last as long now because of the issue, but it's still good. Mm-hmm. If it was available for sale, I mean, like not ruptured packaging in transit, but maybe something that happened internally and therefore it's still safe to sell. I mean, not that I would be like, I'm not advocating for scooping tea up off the ground and selling it. But something happened internally, right? That you're like, oh, oops, our bad, right? So sell this one first because it's maybe going to go stale quicker. And this one, that has been stored properly and still has all of its nice aroma, this one can come after that.
Yeah. And it's, I agree. Both of these teas, again, we're not, tasting apples to apples. There would be a price difference in each of these just because of the difference in processing.
I'm so surprised by how different they look too. Like that's really cool. The visual on it.
You can see how the ones that are processed, the mechanical, the automated process, they're a little more torn up too. They have like crepey looking. And where you guys still have the leaf still has some like stiffness and integrity.
I was just going to say, like they're a little bit limp and kind of soft versus the ones that are handmade are really their integrity is really great. So we had a question come in about this tea specifically. I think we've covered most of it, but the defining step for this tea compared to other Chinese green teas, would you say that's this unique pressing, right?
The pressing is part of its weirdness, and also the variety itself, right? Where you have this massive leaf. I mean, it starts that way. You've got a local variety that is growing leaves that size. They're also waiting fairly long to get. It's a leaf and two buds is what you see in each of these pressings that are stacked on themselves. More obvious in our the handmade one.
Yeah, in sample B, you can see if you find a leaf where it's all intact, the bud and the two leaves, there is some tearing and like internal tearing too, not just on the edge, but like inside on the folds. There's some tearing there. It's not as intact as C.
Yeah. You can see what they're dealing with here is see if I can get a good. There we go. 2 leaves in a bud.
2 leaves in a bud.
Yeah, fairly large ones at that. And so that is the plucking standard for this tea. So unlike some spring green teas, where you're plucking a leaf in a bud, or just the bud itself. I'm waiting for an early spring green tea that's just made out of like scale leaves, like the very earliest growth.
Oh my goodness!
First, right?
And how expensive would that be?
Probably. Yeah, but so they're actually waiting a while to get some maturity in the plucking or in the plant before they pluck it. So that's another thing that's part of the character of typing, hopefully. And so that combination of the unusual raw material itself, and then this really deliberate processing style that's pressed between metal grate that is I'd say what makes it very unique. And you want something that I think with this tea it can stand up to really aggressive steeping parameters too. And I've even taking the dust, the broken pieces at the bottom of a package.
That's cool.
Yeah, and hitting them with
you can make your own little Typing Hokway travel tea bags.
Yeah, you can, and you get pretty good. It's actually my boss, Yu-Ting. She likes to drink all the dust.
Yum. I love of really fine teas, the dust that's at the bottom. If you can get like a whole scoop of it, oh, it's so good. Like for some teas, especially the really downy ones, it's so sweet and yummy.
Yeah.
I always wanted to sell a tea called like the Dust Bunnies or something, like the tea Dust Bunnies, and that's what that would be.
There's a vendor, I think maybe it was Upton Tea Imports, a long time online tea vendor. I think they would sell notable dust or something like that.
Cool.
Some famous teas, which I like that.
Why not? It's educational. I mean, and that's kind of the thing, is understanding all the parts of tea that are useful and tasty. And, I think what I really like about this tasting and this topic is that things just aren't black and white. You really do have to kind of be open to just exploring, and learning. And actually, so like one last question I wanted to ask you as we kind of wrap up here. So I think this is a little bit difficult for us, because since we work in this industry, it's harder to just you don't just turn things off, right? When you separate like your personal tea drinking and buying from your professional, that's definitely hard. But are there things that would you say that you have learned along the way from working with tea as your job that do help influence your personal tea curation, your personal buying? So like, because Seven Cup specializes in Chinese teas, right? So that leaves like a whole world of other tea that you could be exploring and also enjoying. What lessons do you apply to your personal tea buying that you think you could share with folks who don't work in tea, but who are just trying to figure out how to buy tea better? How be smarter about it?
Yeah, this is awful advice for me to give as like a vendor of tea, but what I've learned is less is more, really, and it's easy to accumulate a massive amount of tea that you get around to drinking, and really finding opportunities to drink that tea and share that tea, doing tea trades or whatever, I think is a lesson I really learned, because especially working with tea, you can accumulate quite a lot of it, and just buying tea as a hobbyist, you can accumulate quite a lot of it, and so finding ways to drink and enjoy that tea, whether it be sharing, trading, or aging, right, and then drinking it later. That's an important thing to do, so being deliberate with what you keep, and being deliberate to drink it. So having a concise inventory is something you want, and sure, any business, but
and treating it like an inventory too. Like I know obviously like I work in tea, so the description makes sense, but even to consumers I'm talking to, I talk about that I maintain an inventory, and I do because I have to. Like I may not sell tea, but I have an inventory of what is for personal and inventory of what is for classes, and make sure that all of that is being cycled through so that it maintains freshness. Because that's really important, and you do have to work on it. So I think for folks who don't work in tea, it's just a matter of, well, how much time and work do you want to put into that hobby of, think of your tea like houseplants. How many houseplants can you really take care of?
Right.
Because they need you to take care of them. Tea doesn't just sit there on the shelf like a cup and does nothing.
It can
take care of it. It can, and it's
aging. And I think that's the origin of a lot of aged teas, or kind of the discussion of aged tea, that came out of pour tea, is that as a vendor, a lot of people have old oolong tea sitting around, or old white tea sitting around, and it's a great way to move it. And so I think it definitely want to take care of that tea, and you want to engage what you've bought in an active way. That would be my advice. But on just the final word, my opinion on the subject of aging is the only thing you can really count on is that your tea is going to change, and the discourse is still developing on what's going to be desirable and undesirable. I wouldn't put it past the really creative industry of tea that things that were unthinkable, as old tea today could be, the treasure of tomorrow. And it's
aged Anji Bai Cha. Like, I don't believe that when I see it.
No, actually, I don't have it with me. It's at.
Do you have some?
Oh yeah.
Oh, cool.
Unintentionally, I have some 15-year-old Anji Bai Cha.
What?
Yeah, 2004. Yeah.
Bring that to Tea Expo.
It's totally black. It looks like
cool.
like tea that they make out of Anji Bai Cha, or the Anji Hong, right? Is the black tea you can find made from the Bai cultivar. But it looks like that, It's we could drink it. But I mean,
no claims. Like, we have no idea.
I'd expect it to be, like, not so great, but okay. I'm happy to. I didn't expect you to get so excited about that. I'd be glad.
I just think it's cool. I remember, like, the folks at GS Haley telling me about, like, they found I forget what tea it was, but it was a container of like a sample that was seriously like 20 years old, and they're like, all right, let's do it. Let's taste it. And surprisingly, it did not suck. I think it was a Darjeeling.
Wow.
Like, cool.
So there you go. It's never too late for that shelf of tea.
As long as it's done proper. Like, I mean, if it were, say, in somebody's cupboard above their microwave or something, it's like baked in there, and just not so great.
Not ideal by I think most people's preferences, but
Actually, that does remind me. So, did you have any general observations about brewing differences between really fresh tea and tea that's a little bit older? Like, if you were to try to compensate a little bit for a slightly older tea versus how do you handle one that's really fresh? Like, I know I brew them a little bit differently too, and I'm just wondering if you've like kind of observed like a standard, or not like a standard, but a rule of thumb that you like to apply.
Well, with older examples, things like pu'er tea and oolongs as well. The rinse is a common thing to see. Being insistent on the rinse in aged tea. Maybe a couple of rinses to get it, if it's compressed, right, to get it up and ready to go. But it seems sensible. That seems to work, especially if you're dealing with something that's been in the open air. Off some storage flavor, and then you get into the meat of it. So that's useful. But beyond that, dealing with aged teas, my personal approach is I prefer like a long, sort of gentle steep, high volume, pint glass, and that's that's personal preference. shortage of people that'll insist on really concentrated tea, brewed in a silver teapot or really hot yeasting clay, especially for aged examples, right? But I think in terms of dialing in something that's older, I don't have any specific advice there. Suze, how about you? What do
you? Usually what I do is I cup it to kind of see what does it all have left in it to give versus how it cupped, when it was fresh. Because when I taste it when it's fresh and it's kind of all in and you get an idea of like, okay, this is the max capacity of what this tea could do. So how do I selectively choose what I want to highlight? I do the same for something that's a little bit older. I cup it and then see like, all right, this is what's left. This is what's here. If I'm trying to eliminate that kind of flattened quality, maybe not like as flat as this, but just slightly a little deflated. I agree. Like the longer, more gentle steep is usually the better way to go. It gets a little bit more like the savory, purposeful vegetal flavor without it going off into the bitter territory.
Yeah, as things get older or flatten out, or just flavors become more concentrated and kind of I think it can take some time. Like if you go at it really aggressively with the flash brew, unless you're dealing with tea that's really really intense to begin with. I think like Shungpur is such a awesome aging candidate, right? Because you have oftentimes very intense tea to begin with, and it retains that intensity through aging. But dealing with other stuff, even some like open leaf rock oolong, that hasn't been re-roasted recently. Like a flash brew, you'll get a lot from, and I think pushing the steeping times just intuitively seems to make sense there. In my personal opinion. Or really upping the leaf, going,
That's true too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do that especially with greens because even though it seems instinctually maybe you pull back a little bit, but if you actually put more in there and then dial back the brewing, it compensates for that overall flatness by giving it a little bit more mouthfeel, which is really quite nice. Yeah.
You and me, World Tea Expo, we're going to be brewing 25 grams of 15 I don't know, scratching our heads about it.
Why didn't we get in on Kevin's rare tea tasting night? We could have offered that. That would be great.
Yeah, see, that's it's definitely.
I'll have to let him know. I was gonna be like, next time you could invite us. We might have some cool treasures for you.
Oh, yeah. We'll see.
Yeah.
Gosh, I should have mailed you some of that tea. That would have been a great.
Like, what is it?
Yeah. Or it could be like
one of these things is really not like the other. Awesome. Yeah. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for sharing some tea and some tea time, and this was awesome. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you to all your crew at Being Tea.
Yeah. Happy to have you back anytime.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cheers till we meet in Expo.
Cheers.
And thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you soon in class. Take care.
Happy tea, everybody.
Happy tea.